Hi, this is Takatoshi Shibayama, host of the Future Design Podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking to Fiona Edwards Brown, who's the assistant principal to the International School of Singapore, which is an international school based in Singapore, as the name suggests. And she's also the coordinator of the high school diploma and also English as a second language. Now, she's going to be talking to us about how the future beholds for education. Now, we're entering a world of AI, automation, robotics, and a lot of the jobs that we're going to have is going to be automated away. Now, what kind of kids are we creating for the next generation? This is a topic that I've been really excited and interested in learning about. So stick around to the end.
Right now, obviously there's not going to be that kind of jobs that we are really accustomed today. And but the education was always about creating, how do you make more workers out into society, right? And how do you make these people follow leaders, or in some sense nowadays we're focusing on how to create leaders as well. But this is a very cut and paste type of way of thinking of how to create people, right? Because you're teaching them the same thing, and then you're trying to push them out into society with certain degrees or skill sets. But thing is, I believe that because of this AI and automation, that a lot of the jobs are not going to be coming out of companies. It's going to be coming out from you within. And what value can you add to this world? What kind of products that people would want? A lot of things can be done through, like, let's say 3D printing, or even video editing. Like the things that I'm doing today is that I can do this at my home. So I don't need a company to tell me this is the job that you need to do. I'm thinking about how to create my own business by myself, and then trying to gather people to work together. Sometimes they could be all decentralized in different different geographical locations. So I mean, are we still educating kids that they're going to be future workers, or are we educating kids so that they can be something else?
Well, I hope we are teaching and educating our kids to be something else, because I really think we don't really have a choice right now. I mean, we know that we're on the trajectory to a future that is really unknown. And so I think, in the last 20 years of my own teaching career, I've seen a massive change, a real shift from teaching knowledge to actually teaching the skills, and the things that you're talking about, the kinds of jobs that our own children might be finding. Bring to mind words like entrepreneurship, communication, people skills. Perhaps these jobs that our children will end up creating are actually born out of problems that they see. And so, as you said, the jobs are not going to be provided by the companies, but actually are going to come from the next generation themselves, where they're tech savvy, they have knowledge at their fingertips. And so I hope that we can teach our children how to, identify a problem, how to problem solve and work together, collaborate, be good communicators, be able to sell those ideas. Language is still at the forefront of many of these things. And of course, coding is a huge thing right now, and the development in computer science. Traditional subjects such as the sciences and mathematics, I think will still play a large part in all that, but perhaps the way those subjects are taught or presented might be different. We have a huge there's a lot of stuff coming out of Finland, which is recognized as a leader in education right now, and they're doing something called phenomenal-based learning, where children are no longer learning in silo subjects, but actually looking at real-life problems and learning concepts and working towards problem solving and collaborating and producing products. And so on top of that, you also have this idea of conceptual learning, which is a very big trend word in education right now too. So I think the shift is happening. I'd like to say that it's happening. I think if I compare the teaching I'm doing now to 20 years ago, it's very different. Education will no doubt change a little bit slower than the tech industry. The tech industry is changing so rapidly. We've seen massive changes in the last few weeks because of the COVID-19 situation. And of course, education systems are controlled and to a large extent accountable to governments. And so those changes need to come from governments themselves. But I hope that the future generation have a voice and that they will be able to be part of their own, design of their education that they're going to receive.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that they're going to be a part of the education that they receive because, as you mentioned, these problem solving, concept based learning, from my understanding is that the students need to come up with those problems themselves and then find a way to solve those problems with a group or as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you see over this past 20 years that you mentioned that you've been in education? How have the kids changed? Because I find that, in the last 20 years, we went from, very basic level of internet to AI all of a sudden, right? We're not at advanced levels of AI, but, we were very at the cusp of a big, evolution of AI. So the kids that grown up with this new technology and different information that they're receiving through the internet has dramatically changed. Obviously, you and I know that when we were children, the biggest source of information was going to the library. And then we flipped through these library cards to find the books that we needed to find, and that took a long while to do research and reports for us to hand in our products of education. However, now with the one click, you can find so much information. And then in these past 20 years, even that level of information over that 20 years has exploded in quantity. So how do you see the children evolving to this time?
I think, yeah, that's a really tough question. And I mean, as a parent of young children, I take a moment to pause on that question because I'm really terrified, even for my own kids. What kind of learners are they, and how does the technology and the access to the information at our fingertips, how does that change them? And I think actually, kids are kids. I think fundamentally we haven't changed like much. I think what kids still need is still the same thing. They need the security of family. They need to have someone guide them and navigate them through this complicated world. I think, yes, the access to information has changed. The way they are learning has and is going to change. The way we teach them is going to change. But at the core of it is really all the human element of everything. And we still know that we need human connection and we need human relationships. I think we still need to teach our children what's right and what's wrong. We need to develop their moral compass, and how that translates into the technology side of things is things with academic integrity. Schools now are very big with teaching children how to read fake news, how to really question the information that they get, and be a very critical reader and viewer in everything that they consume. And that in itself is a whole other complicated conversation. And so teaching those kinds of skills are still, perhaps they weren't as focused on when you and I were at school, but they certainly are now. So that kind of thing is different. But I think, teaching children empathy and teaching them communication and, genuine, authentic communication and connection is still at the root of everything. Yes, all the fancy technology is there and no doubt will influence what the outcome will be, but I think the journey to get there is still going to be the same. Children still need to be loved. Children still need to learn about themselves. And I think by saying that too, it reminds me that another shift that's happened in education from my perspective is that there is more emphasis on learning how to learn. So I think maybe that's another big change too, even in parenting, literature. When you and I were growing up, our parents probably didn't talk that much to us about learning to learn, and neither did the teachers. Whereas I think now, because there's that shift away from consumption of knowledge, because everything is there at our fingertips, then it becomes about, well, how do we learn then? What is that process? And so giving the children the meta language to discuss that and to reflect on that is really important. And we also see a massive shift in that in terms of well-being. So that's another huge element, I think, to things. Well, the well-being of our children hasn't changed. That's something that's still important to parents and to educators around the world. And I think that's actually going to be an area that might be really further developed, because we know the pitfalls of technology. We know the battles we all have as parents with the devices. And, ironically, our children are learning through their devices. And so there's this balance that has to take place. And so keeping our children's well-being also is going to be a battle. And I think parents, I'm sure you yourself are learning all the meta language in order to discuss these with our own children, to identify the feelings that they feel and to help them navigate their own feelings and manage themselves, because we are living in a different world. And, it's new for us as much as it is for them.
Yeah, you touched on very good points there, where you talk about, the humanitarian values or the human values that we need to harness more than ever. And then also the critical thinking part, where, we're building out engineers and coders to provide for the advancement of technology. So we need people who can think, what if, and then what? These kind of things are basic skill sets of coding.
Mm-hmm.
And then also when you mean about the mindfulness or the wellness being well-being for the children and their mindset is very important, because this is a very touched upon topic for the newer generation ideas. I've heard stories about schools that are teaching kids how to meditate, and teaching more about mindfulness, about taking care of more of their mental part, not just the physical and academic part, which I think is a very important kind of trilogy of new ways of educating kids. But let's I want to dig a little bit deeper on the humanitarian part of us, because as we build out these technologies, whether they are AI or automation or any type of engineering work, it could be advancement of nuclear technology as well. I mean, there's so many, or even self-driving cars. Human beings are always the cursor for the technology, right? So, back in the probably the 50s and 60s and 70s, we were all scared about nuclear bombs, and we were scared that people will drop them on and then create a huge World War III. But, for now, it hasn't happened, and we're living in the most prosperous and very peaceful 70 years that probably humanity has ever actually experienced.
Mm-hmm.
You might say that there are wars and economic disasters happening, and especially this COVID-19 situation as well. But compared to the medieval times or even pre-World War II, I mean, we're living in a very peaceful time now. The technology, if we take it even further to these AIs in automation and robotics, there are people who are behind these technology, who are programming these, and they're trying to give these things an ethical usage for it, right? And whether you determine, if a self-driving car should, when they're running and they see kids running out with an old lady, and if it goes left, it'll hit the kid. If it goes right, it'll hit the old lady. And if it runs straight, it'll kill them both. And they have to decide in that moment with which way should the car go. And unless you have these engineers and programmers thinking about ethical things, ethical values of humans, they can't program that inside of that technology. So I really believe that the ethical value or ethical education, which we probably have not been received that much, maybe through our parents, or maybe through, socializing with people, we start to understand it. Or some people would, go to a church or go into a religious group to learn these ethical values, but I don't think we really learned that in school. So how are schools nowadays trying to teach these ethical values to children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an age-old problem, really, because schools have a tendency to focus on the academics. But again, I think that also has changed. Definitely in my school, we have something called a pastoral curriculum, and all schools, I'm sure, will have this kind of system in place. So you have the academics side of everything, and then you have the pastoral side of everything. And the pastoral really is looking at this as looking at the student or the child as a whole person, and looking at their well-being, and also is a curriculum which teaches them the right and the wrong, the moral compass, the ethics, along with lots of other things like sexual education and how to manage relationships and goal setting and time management skills and things like that. So I think definitely in this situation we're in now, as educators around the world, particularly leaders, I've seen, online, and I've read a few things along the way. A lot of leaders are looking at this with, open eyes and thinking about, well, we know that our education system perhaps is a bit mismatched to what's coming ahead, the future, the unknown future, and then the students who are actually in front of us. It has definitely highlighted what's already been there for a long time, which is the inequality amongst different groups. And so I do worry about that side of things. That's another discussion, of course, in regards to what kind of access different groups have to the technology. Are we going to see only affluent communities advance with these new advancements in the technologies? I hope not, because of course we have seen things like Khan Academy and YouTube, and actually there's a lot of ways to access things to improve our knowledge and our skills. But I think fundamentally, if it actually has highlighted to educators around the world and parents too, is the well-being of our kids. And so I hope it will allow schools to stop and take a step back and look at their pastoral programs. And mindfulness, as you mentioned, is a really big thing right now. And a lot of schools have picked that up, mine included, where we are teaching our kids to meditate and to look after themselves mentally, and to have the language to describe those feelings. I think the engineers who are going to create the AI that will, manage a lot of our aspects of our lives, I only hope have those strong moral compass, has the ability to be compassionate and empathetic. And I think it's an exciting time. I think the technology actually available to us can teach some of these things, but fundamentally we are the creators of that technology, and as the creators of that technology, we have a responsibility to ensure that the technology is used for the better good, that the technology is still used to develop the whole person, the person who can understand that it's okay to make mistakes, and that, you make a mistake, you learn from it, and you improve, or teach that person what's right and wrong, and also to understand that there are going to be people around the world who are less fortunate from them. I think one clear example of what my children are experiencing, which I didn't have, is that world view. The things that they're learning tend to have we're at an international school, we're living here in Singapore, and so of course many of the case studies or examples used in class have an international flavor to it, but my children can actually see global problems, be it poverty or people who don't have access to water. Our school is very big on something called global citizenship, and that's also part of the pastoral program in ensuring that the students are getting their academics, but also having a very global view. And at the end of the day, we're, as an international school, we're trying to educate our kids so that they are the real global citizens of the world, somebody who is empathetic and working towards a better world, a more peaceful world, a more harmonious world. And so encompassed in all those things are, you know, the characteristics that you would expect in somebody who is more globally minded and empathetic, someone who is open-minded, someone who is a carer, someone who is a critical thinker, and someone who's principled. So these are the type of things that are really embedded within the curriculum that we're offering.
Yes, Singapore is actually a very developed nation. Everything works. It's very organized. But one step out of Singapore, you have Indonesia, we have in Philippines, we have Malaysia. There's many countries that we can visit and see that the rest of the world is actually not like Singapore. Now, I've done a couple of trips to Indonesia with my kids, obviously my family, and we walk around the beach and we see a lot of plastics floating in the ocean. We walk around the Indonesian villages, neighborhoods, and see plastics being thrown all over the place, and we see poverty, many different aspects of life that it's not really visible in Singapore. So it gives us a chance to show our kids that the world is not actually all perfect like Singapore. And I think that kind of knowledge creates or helps them create more empathy towards people who don't have particularly the material things or the economic level that we're actually have achieved in our lives. And you also talked about mental resilience, and I think that's part of it, of something that's really important. And whether you're a believer of a utopian future or dystopian, there will be a time where people will grow into the society and become successful or unsuccessful. And as we just mentioned in the beginning, with the automation of works, and there's a lot of jobs that will be gone, and they might not be jobs that the kids want or they can actually get. So there's always going to be a class of the achievers and then the non-achievers. So if any of these kids fall into these non-achievers, and like Yuval Noah Harari also talked about these useless class of people, but there is a chance that a lot of people might fall into this and not even be able to go up the ladder to become the achiever side of the society. So how do you set them up for that? Because you talked about resilience to failure, all right, or be comfortable with failure. But in our lifetime, we're going to find that this is not just one industrial revolution that we're going to experience. There's going to be multiple of them in a much shorter time span. And that's what I believe, because AI is going to get better, automation is going to get better, and every time we have to retrain ourselves, upskill ourselves. Every time we're going to hit a wall because we're going to lose a job and then have to think about another way to get ourselves up and find another way to earn a living. So what are the mental practices do you think that we can educate our children, not as just educators like yourselves, but as parents as well, to set them up for this potential hardships in life?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually quite a personal question, because it really depends on what kind of person you are yourself too. And many a time I've had to step back and think about myself as a parent and what kind of parent I want to be and what kind of parent I actually am. And I think schools are working really hard towards this now. There's a lot of material out there and literature out there that tells us that having grit and resilience is an extremely important skill and fundamental to success in life. And how you define success, of course, is also a very personal thing. But no matter how you define success, it is inevitable that you will experience failure in your life at some point. And so how do we teach our kids to pick themselves up and keep on going? And I think probably at the core of that is to give them those experience of having failure, not being the helicopter parent, which of course is in the literature out there, allowing our kids the space and the time to make mistakes and to try and do things on their own. Yes, be there, of course, so that they don't fall too hard, but ultimately they need to have those failures. They need to have those experiences in order to, come out of it and go, oh, actually, that was okay. It wasn't as bad as I thought, and I came out of it okay in the end. And in fact, I learned something about myself. And if presented with this problem again, I may approach it differently. So we do use those words in schools as well. I mean, resilience is something that is part of a strong pastoral program. Growth mindset by Carol Dweck is a huge trend as well right now, and a lot of schools are adopting some of her ideas. And we even see it amongst teachers too, where a good team of teachers are those who are willing to adopt growth mindset attitudes and values. And so if you look essentially at the groups who are influencing the future generations, that's us, the parents, it's the teachers. And if we are able to model those behaviors, then ultimately our children will also, hopefully follow those behaviors and be able to see that, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fall and as long as you can learn from that experience and basically become stronger and wiser. So I think allowing them the space to make those mistakes, definitely. Allowing them to experiment, which I think is another really important aspect of education amongst the future. And I mean that from a scientific, innovative, creative thinking kind of way as well, where, we will need to give our students and our children the experiences where they can try something new, or, where they might ask, well, what happens if I do this? Well, I don't know, let's find out. And so having that kind of inquiry approach to teaching and learning is really important. And part of that inquiry approach is to allow them to recognize the mistakes. One of the big things that we're doing right now in education is we have a kind of a design cycle in place for many of the things that we do. And so part of that design cycle is not just the innovative part of creating, coming up with an idea and then at the end of that design cycle having the product, but actually the cycle continues in the sense that you will evaluate that product and you will reflect on that product and you will reflect on yourself as well. And so reflection is a huge part of education, I would say right now too, where students are being asked to reflect on the process as well as reflecting on themselves as a learner so that they can improve for next time, but also on the flip side, evaluate the product that they've come up with, so that they're constantly thinking about these ways to improve. So in that sense, that kind of thinking process, that design process, that creative process is fundamental to a lot of the things that we do. And you see that I see it in the macro planning of curriculums of a whole school, from K to 12 curriculum right down to the micro planning of lessons that we create for our students, whether it be a 5-minute experience or a 40-minute lesson experience.
So I guess a lot of the academic part has always kind of been put, I wouldn't say aside, but there's been more curriculums around different topics, I guess, you say mental resilience or learning how to learn, these program-based things. So do you find that the teaching or the educational curriculums that you have to come up with has become a lot more complex than before? Because even for our parent ourselves, and we've been doing home-based learning throughout this quarantine time, a lot of the things that we have to do for our kindergarten level kids is a lot of games and a lot more playful kind of activities, as opposed to write this word 10 times, write that sentence several times so that you can memorize it. I mean, it's a lot more I guess it's activity based, if I say it in a very layman's way. So, do you find that even within the IB system that you've been accustomed to throughout these 20 years, I mean, do you find that the curriculum, the depth of it, the variety of it has changed?
Yes, definitely. I think, I worked for the first 8 years of my career in an Australian curriculum, which at that point was already kind of outcomes based, which is what the IB curriculum is very much about. And yeah, I think it definitely has become more complex because we've realized that, uh, we can't teach one model that will fit all. And so along the way, we have other trends such as what's called differentiated teaching, and where you really recognize the individual as a learner and that all children will learn differently and at different paces. And so, and of course, every child brings a different fund of knowledge and a different suitcase of experience with them. And that, of course, influences how they learn and how they perform in the class. And so as those ideas and concepts have really pervaded professional development for teachers, it has become more complex. We are really balancing the academics and trying to meet the standards and objectives that we've set for ourselves, or that the schools have set for us through the curriculum. But at the same time, we have to balance it with knowing our students and really understanding what their needs are, understanding that they're all so different, understanding that well-being at the core of it is really important. And so how do you make the learning fun? Obviously for the younger kids, it's going to be more play-based learning, and it's no longer that rigid, style of learning that we might have seen in schools back in the Industrial Revolution. But I think now education is very much about teaching the whole child. And so that is one of the most complex things you can ever try to do. And parents, of course, all over the world now are really, whether they knew it already or not, they're really experiencing how difficult it is to teach their children. Obviously, there's an emotional element to it. When you teach your own child, it's very different to teaching someone else's child. But now having a deeper understanding of what teachers have to deal with, and I hope out of all of this, we really come out with a greater appreciation for what teachers do. Teachers are highly, highly skilled people who make thousands of decisions in one day, all in the effort to keep the students engaged and performing at their best, and of course, keeping their well-being at the heart of it. So yes, teaching has definitely become more complex in the last decade, for sure.
Yeah, you're actually building the new generation of leaders and creators of this world. So I highly salute you for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It was a lot of very valuable topics that we spoke about, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked this show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.